climate. So here we're comparing the extent of sea ice in 1979 and 2017. And you can see there's a whole lot less sea ice now than there previously was. And that graph shows the decline in sea ice extent. Next slide, please. But climate change is not just about melting ice caps. So, and we know it's not just about increasing the temperature of the planet. It will make storms worse storms, stronger storms, and it will also increase the risk of flood, and also increase the risk of drought, even though those things seem sort of mutually exclusive. And in some areas, it will reduce summer water availability due to glacial melt. When we have smaller glaciers, then the annual melt that feeds rivers gets reduced. Next slide, please. And so that means that climate change is going to, and in fact has already started, changing the areas where we can produce food. In general, we're less able to produce food, and this will become more and more true, around the equator. Instead, places further to the north and the south will be able to produce more food. That means that in general, agricultural productivity, so our ability to make food, is shifting away from developing countries, which are around the equator, to already developed countries. And that's a big problem, because the people in the developed countries can't necessarily afford to have resources shipped to them. So that means this will create a lot of suffering, especially around the equator in developing countries. Because people whose families have relied on farming, for instance, for many generations, those farms won't be able to produce enough food for their families. Next slide, please. As a result, people will move. When a farm no longer can sustain you, you tend to go where you think you have a better future. In the United States of America, during the Great Depression, there was mass migration within the United States because of the Dust Bowl effect. So areas where people were farmers and used to be able to grow enough for their families, they stopped being able to do that. And so they moved to other states in vast numbers. One other thing that will happen as there stops being quite enough food is that this increases the likelihood of violent conflict. So, many of us are aware of the conflict in Syria, people fighting with each other. A number of scholars have argued that this conflict was initiated in part because of climate change. Not just because of climate change, but in part. So, Syria experienced a very bad drought right before the conflict. And at the same time, the Assad regime changed some policies about helping farmers with money. So the farmers were not able to grow anything, and they weren't getting any government money. And so many sent their sons into the cities to find work. But there was no work to find for many of them. And so you had a lot of unemployed young men. And that is a recipe for conflict. So, and we know that the conflict in Syria led to a lot of forced migration. In fact, slide please, it contributed to record levels of displaced people. In 2018, something like 70 million people were displaced according to the UNHCR. And this is a global record. So there are more people who were forced away from where they needed to be, or from their homes, than ever before. And this has been increasing over the last 10 years. And these displaced people are trying to get away from suffering, from situations of substantial suffering, including, like Syria, violent conflict. Now, we've talked about how climate change will lead to migration. And in some ways, migration could be a very useful way to adapt to some climate change. Because if we're shifting where you can grow food, then maybe we need to shift the farmers as well. And if we're making some places just too hot to live, we want to move people away from them. But this will only work if we have cooperation between countries and within countries and understanding. Because we know most of the migration will be within and between developing countries. So often, for instance, migration to Europe or the United States gets a lot of attention in newspapers. But in fact, most migration, or much migration, especially if people displaced from conflict, is between developing countries. So, thank you. What do we think will happen? Well, as I said, much will depend on how much we understand each other and how much we're willing to cooperate with each other. Unfortunately, there have been a lot of recent signs that people are not going to be very understanding. So the first picture, as I understand it, is from Australian government to potential people, potential refugees. So refugees try to get to Australia via other countries like Indonesia or Malaysia. And Australia doesn't want those people, to put it very bluntly. And so they have advertisements like that one, saying, no way, you're not going to get here. In the United States of America, much of Trump's popularity is because he wants to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. Now, I grew up on that border. I can tell you that a wall probably isn't going to stop everyone from coming over. But a wall symbolizes many Americans' fear of people migrating, people that might occupy jobs or take jobs that they would otherwise have, and some of it's not very rational fear. So, because right now, it is likely, due to climate change, there will be a lot of migration. And right now, it doesn't look like